connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN and Focus. And joining me today is our EBC Thailand Bureau's Esther Odanga, who's also celebrating her birthday today. Hello, Esther.
Hi, I'm Esther Odanga from EBC Thailand Bureau, giving you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, the Philippines will shut its borders to foreigners arriving from 20 countries and territories in a bid to prevent a new strain of coronavirus.
You mentioned also about...
And Chief Data Scientist of Publicus Asia, Dr. David Barua Yap, to discuss with us the findings of the nationwide 2020 Pahayag End of the Year survey. First, the Philippines will shut its borders to foreigners arriving from 20 countries and territories in a bid to prevent a new strain of coronavirus entering the nation, officials said Tuesday. The ban on travelers from places including Australia, France, Japan, and Hong Kong comes as the archipelago braces for a post-Christmas surge in the virus that has affected nearly 500,000 people. Dozens of countries closed their borders to the Britain in recent weeks over rising cases of a variant that is believed to spread faster. The Philippines, which has not yet detected the new strain, was among them, and in Tuesday's announcement, it extended the ban to January 15. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque said the measure takes effect Wednesday, today. Foreigners have been largely banned from entering the country during the pandemic, but authorities recently started to allow entry to holders of certain types of visas. Filipinos returning home from countries on the list will be allowed to enter, but will have to undergo 14 days quarantine even if they test negative for COVID-19.
And for our special feature today, we continue our discussion with Chief Data Scientist of Publicus Asia, Dr. David Yap II, to discuss with us the findings of the nationwide 2020 Pahayag End of the Year survey. Dr. Yap is a rising star in the Philippine econometrics and data science circles. He also holds a decade of experience in academic research, data analysis, and policy strategy. Now, earlier, he discussed the 9 modules studied in the survey, which is state of the economy and economic prospects, assessment of COVID-19 responses, key national issues, leadership scorecard, emotional quotient, media consumption habits and responses to media campaigns, predisposition, travel, and blended learning. We continue. We go now to our discussion proper. Let's listen in.
Based on this, if you were to formulate a list of advice or recommendations based on these findings, what would be topmost in your priorities for 2021? Would it be COVID? And in what terms would you recommend improvements based on your data?
Ma'am, ang background ko po kasi is economics and statistics. So I have a personal bias leaning towards on ensuring that we get our economy back on track. While I'm sure that we all could acknowledge the threat of COVID, I would think that I would personally labas ko lang po yung issues, ma'am.
Okay.
I would personally tend to favor focusing on the economy and jobs because while COVID remains a threat that we should not underestimate, it is, I would think, equally important not to underestimate the cost in terms of welfare, of human lives, of losing jobs, of losing livelihood, and of economic contractions. So if we consider this in terms of trade-offs, if we keep on constraining economic activity, if we keep on locking down, if we keep on adding restrictions that hamper an economic recovery, then what would happen is that these would cost people jobs, business opportunities, and if that happens, then we might reduce the risk of COVID, of contracting COVID, or we can reduce the rate at which COVID spreads, but people may not have jobs with which to keep themselves and their families alive. And at the same time, I think at this point in time, we have learned enough about COVID that we now have adopted and adapted several innovations and protocols that would allow most of the labor market to go back to work safely. So there are now safety protocols for going back to work. In terms of COVID risk, we now know, or we now have a better idea of who are the people in our country who are at most risk of contracting COVID, as well as contracting complications because of COVID, particularly fatal complications. So from our research, and these resources are readily available online, we know that the people who are aged 50, 55 and above, those with pre-existing conditions such as hypertension, obesity, and other heart problems are the ones who are at most risk of developing complications that are rooted in their pre-existing conditions that can be aggravated to a very severe degree by COVID. So having said that, I would think that we are now equipped with the information necessary to open up, at least within the bounds of the parameters set by our safety protocols, to open up the Philippine economy and work towards recovering the ground lost during the onset of the pandemic and the accompanying lockdowns in the months that followed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with regards to, as you said, as your own personal priorities, economy and jobs, given the Filipinos' current choices for leaders in 2022, for example, Sara Duterte, Bongbong Marcos, Isko Dumagoso, and Leni Robredo, what do you see as the Philippines' future in terms of the economy and jobs? Do these political personalities have particular strengths in the fields of the economy and jobs building?
I think that if we consider 2022, so let's say, I will answer I will just preface my answer by saying that we sort of lucked out into having the pandemic happen in the year before campaign season, because historically, if we look back in our previous election cycles, what usually happens is that spending picks up during the months leading up into the elections. So anytime from June of 2021 up until May of 2022, spending demand will pick up, and that is a sizable boost to our economy, and that is something that we can hope for in the coming year. insofar as the names that are popping up and the names that people are mentioning for 2022, I think that the pattern that sort of emerges with the selection of people of in terms of their predisposition for president, vice president, people appear to prefer candidates or rather names that have some level of executive experience, particularly local government executive experience. So the names that you have mentioned, they are all known or at least partially known. They made their name, they established their reputation, at least in part because of their performance in their local executive roles. So you have Mayor Sara Duterte, Mayor Isko, and former Senator BBM was of course governor of Ilocos Norte several years back. So I think there is this tendency towards people who are from the executive, and that I think stems in part from the recognition of the executive being more hands-on, being more decisive, and of course that sort of sentiment is amplified or is given more heft by their experiences with President Duterte. So if I think we both could agree that regardless of what people may think of his candor, at the end of the day, a lot of people value his governance or choose to support him because of his perceived decisiveness. And again, that loops back to his record in governing Davao City.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes, so are we to understand that the 2022 elections is heavily dependent on President Duterte's support?
Ma'am, we do have some signs showing that if we look at we have some signs showing that President Duterte will exert some level of influence on the result, or his endorsement will have bearing. Mm-hmm. But given our recently released, so ma'am, I can pull it up.
Okay.
There we go. So if we look at the spread of names for in our predisposition survey, in our Pahayag end of the year survey, we find that there are a lot of names that can be viewed to be competitive. So there is, at this point in time, no clear front runner, but there are names that achieved some level of prominence, at least double digit. And you have, of course, Mayor Sara Duterte, as you mentioned, former Senator Bongbong Marcos, Mayor Isko, VP Robredo, and of course we have here Senator Pacquiao, Senator Poe, Senator Soto, or Senate President Soto, and of course Senator Go. So as I was saying earlier, the spread is very wide. We have a wide spread of names, but and there is no clear front runner at this point in time. Now, going back to your question, po, ma'am, would the endorsement of President Duterte matter in 2022? At this point in time, I would say yes, given that one, he maintains a high level of approval and trust. So that suggests that he, at this point in time, maintains a high level of political equity that he can leverage to in his endorsement of a candidate. The next sign would be that we find that 3 of the top 4 names are people that can be viewed to be, at the very least, friendly with the president. So there is that sort of alignment of support. when it comes to supporting President Duterte and supporting these three candidates.
So, is there anyone in the opposition who is showing a strong influence or coming up to be a potential oppositor to the Duterte's political party?
At this point in time, ma'am, of course, VP Robredo has 10% for president, but as you can see in this particular graph, it is noted here that the names with 5% and below are not shown. So, insofar as your question is concerned, po, ma'am, only VP Robredo is popping up as a candidate from the opposition, or at the very least, those that are not firmly aligned with, say, President Duterte, or those who are visibly opposed to President Duterte.
Okay. So does the survey also infer any perceived weakness of the current administration, which could weaken its influence in 2022?
The Duterte's administration success in 2021 and perhaps more importantly in 2022 would depend on their handling of the distribution of the COVID vaccine and the economic recovery of the Philippines. If they succeed in rolling out the COVID vaccine, or if it can be viewed widely as a success, it does not need to be 100% rolled out. But if the majority receive it and it does not encounter any controversies or issues,
yes,
then that would be a major win for the administration.
True.
Another factor would be the economy. If more unemployed and more underemployed people find jobs in 2021 and the first quarter of 2022, then the Duterte administration and its chosen candidates will have momentum heading into 2022. So these are the two, at least at this point in time, the two critical issues that would exert an outsized influence on the strength, so to speak, the political strength of the Duterte administration and its allies.
In the which brings me to my next question. In the U.S. President Trump's COVID response was a factor in his loss. COVID response here also be a factor as what happened in the U.S. as you were saying, yeah.
First off, ma'am, I would think that the COVID response here was relatively well received. We have been tracking approval ratings of major national government agencies, as I mentioned, since the start of the pandemic, and they have remained high. Of course, you have the DOH and the DepEd, as I mentioned earlier, with relatively high disapproval, but approval remains high. So I would think that it shifts now from the handling of the COVID, because we would have 2021 and the first part of 2022 to consider. So it will likely be a year to a year and a half removed from the brunt of the pandemic. So it's not going to be like the immediate response to the pandemic that people will be reacting to. It will be the recovery. So it goes back to what I was saying. It will be the Duterte administration, its performance will be gauged by voters in 2022 based on the manner in which they instituted policies that would allow the economy to recover and roll out the vaccine. So they would not be particularly graded on the basis of how they performed in the first months of the pandemic, but rather how they performed during what many would see as the recovery post first wave of the pandemic.
So it's apparent that the main driver for the Filipinos' prospects for 2021 is the COVID-19 situation and how it is being handled. And that on your survey, 79.9% viewed COVID-19 as a very dangerous threat.
Opo, ma'am. And another 14% po as let me just check out. Mataas rin po kasi yung next level. So these are the ones who view COVID as a very high threat. Moderately dangerous is 14. So for a total of over 90% po, ma'am. Close to 95%.
So Filipinos also want the president to focus on COVID-19, the economy, jobs, above all the concerns, beating corruption, poverty, and drugs. So why does it reflect in the data that the Filipino households' prospects are very hopeful for the improvement, registering at 32.3 for major improvement of financial prospects, and at a minimum of improvement at 44.8%. Isn't there somewhat a disparity there?
Ma'am, I don't think that there is, Paul, because if you consider hope or financial prospects, you have to consider what their base is. So what is their reference point? If, for example, they are underemployed or they're unemployed at the moment, they are looking at 2021 with more opportunities on the horizon. So they are thinking that any job, any opportunity heading into 2021, if they can avail of that, if they can get that job, if they can get that opportunity, it would be better than their current situation. What is important there is to consider their reference point. If they are already down, if they are already in a bad position, then most anything would be viewed as an improvement. So that is something that could be what is causing them to indicate that they are hopeful, or that or make them say that their prospects, their personal financial prospects will improve. I mean, if you're out of work right now, any slight improvement, any job would be an improvement over having no job.
But Dr. Yap, as we know, companies are laying off and putting employees on furlough. Economic prospects are dim. So how do we explain this hopefulness?
Well, for starters, ma'am, it's usually the case that people find a sense of hopefulness with the coming new year. And beyond that, I would think that the imminent rollout of things like the Bayanihan Act 2, the supposed imminent arrival of the vaccine, and the adjustments made by private firms in terms of hiring, they would think that there would be more opportunities that are coming their way. At least better, at least more numerous than what they faced in the first few months of the pandemic. So if you compare, for example, when firms started laying off when the economy was caught flat-footed in May, June, July, and firms had to lay off people because of several months of severe lockdowns, I would think that if they consider what is to come in 2021, those prospects would be, at the very least, a bit brighter, as they would no longer have to contend with in total lockdowns, like what we experienced in the first few weeks of the pandemic. And I think people now have a sense they now have a grasp of what to do. Parang alam na nila kung ano yung pwede nilang gawin. This pandemic isn't as mysterious as it was before. And also, ma'am, at the end of the day, especially if you're in Metro Manila, I'm sure you've seen this during the holiday season. The traffic was pretty bad.
Yes.
And when people see that, parang people get the sense that hey, parang maybe the economy is recovering. You see people going into malls. You see people going into groceries. It's not as malls and groceries are not as crowded as they were in previous holiday seasons, but if you compare it to the volume of people that were frequenting these public places during the height of the pandemic, I mean, when malls first started opening post-pandemic, these are welcome signs, and these help lend people some hope for 2021.
That's true. Does the survey also show that Filipino politics is still personality based, or have we progressed to issues as the main driver for the decision making in elections?
Well, ma'am, I think all politics is personality based, not just in the Philippines. Research has shown that people. There was actually this very interesting set of research papers that showed that people don't actually have this list of, most people don't actually have a list of traits or issues. Most people don't have a checklist of issues or traits that they tick off and they compare to prospective candidates. What they actually do is that they have their own internal biases based on their personality, their emotional state, their past experiences, and they sort of reverse the process. They pick out their names based on their personality traits, their personal biases, and their emotional states, and then they rationalize it by picking out the best parts of their chosen candidates and sort of saying that, this person satisfies these traits that are positive, that are desirable. At the end of the day, for most people, the pull of emotion, the pull of our internal biases, these are pretty strong forces, and it's interesting to note that if we consider a rational voter to be one who only looks at the issues and like the track records and achievements, there's like this rubric of achievements, of plans, of experiences that candidates have to take off. If those are the kinds of rational voters, if they're only looking at issues, then I would not bet against having a majority of rational voters. I would think that it would be exceedingly rare to find purely rational voters running around.
ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Napakagaling mong kumanta.
I like your voice. Napaka-rare ng quality ng voice mo. Masyadong mataas, masyadong maganda.
Ito na lang masabi ko, good luck.
Ang gagaling ninyo.
Grabe yung mga pinakita nyo sa amin.
Sobrang gifted kayo.
I must say, it's one of the best round na napanood ko.
And we continue with our special feature for today. We have Chief Data Scientist of Publicus Asia, Dr. David Yap, to discussing with us the findings of the nationwide 2020 Pahayag End of the Year survey. And to remind our viewers, he's a rising star in the Philippine econometrics and data science circles. He holds a decade of experience in academic research, data analysis, policy strategy. And before this discussion, he had this 9 modules studied in his survey, which is the state of the economy, the economic prospects, assessment of COVID-19 responses, key national issues, leadership scorecard, emotional quotient, media consumption habits and responses to media campaigns, predisposition, travel, and blended learning. And here's the continuation of that interview. Take a look.
You mentioned also about media consumption.
Yes, go ahead.
Habits and responses to media campaigns now. These data on media consumption seems to be very apparent to the layman. Would you say the entry of a third telco company would somehow influence media campaigns leading up to the elections in 2022?
I would hazard that it would have an effect if it manages to lower the cost of entry or lower the price of internet services by a substantial amount and thus increase access on the macro level. So the point is that if a third telco comes in, its impact on media habits would be felt primarily through increased access across the population. So in summary, if this telco enters and it makes the cost of going online, of accessing these platforms cheaper, if it makes it more available, if it extends, if it broadens, so to speak, the online population of the Philippines, then it will have an impact. If it enters and it does not elicit any change in the online population, if it doesn't increase the online population of Filipinos, then it will not affect media habits in any substantive manner.
Does the study say anything about closure of a certain TV station and its effect on the influence and character of the current administration?
Actually, po, ma'am, that was covered in our SONA survey last August, po, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just, I think I can bring that up. Most people were not particularly intent. It garnered support, like granting a new franchise to ABS-CBN had sizable, like 46%, but you also, end of the day, especially if you consider what happened to President Duterte's approval and trust ratings, I don't think that it had any significant effect on the Duterte administration. And at the same time, if you cross-reference it with the numbers that we saw for alternatives to cable television and traditional television, we see that people appear to have shifted away from, or appear to have found substitutes for traditional television programming. So in that sense, I would think that while people may be, while a large proportion of people may seem supportive or at the very least indifferent to ABS-CBN, at the end of the day, it's not something that they cannot live without. Especially now that ABS-CBN appears to have transitioned towards alternative platforms.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When it comes to travel.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, as we all know that travel has been very affected by this pandemic, and with the new strain also that just came up from the United Kingdom and South Africa. We also saw a series of lockdowns due to this new variant spreading to several countries. What can you say about this?
Well, ma'am, at the end of the day, we see that people are all over the world are trying to get back to normal. So we see that in the desire and of course the actual travel of a lot of people. And when it comes to these new strains, I would think that, as I have said earlier, that we have acquired the information needed to respond to new strains with a bit more temperance and a bit more reserve. Na parang we've learned, I think, or I hope rather, that we have learned not to overreact, because if we do, the consequences, the trade-off, the costs of overreaction, of say imposing a 4-week total lockdown, costs of that in terms of jobs, of income, of wages, might be more severe than shaving off points of COVID infection rates. Because at the end of the day, ma'am, if we consider the death rates from COVID, the mortality rates, I think the death rate is at 0.1%, and that is for the most at-risk persons. So for the greater population at large, while it still poses a threat, while you can still contract COVID and get severely sick, the mortality rate is not something that we should be afraid of enough to have severe lockdowns, at least for most people. In my opinion, ma'am, I would urge those in the leadership to consider the economic consequences in terms of jobs, of livelihoods, how these would also affect lives if they are thinking about protracted, extensive lockdowns, po, ma'am.
But the new virus strain has just caused the renewed closure of countries' borders. Isn't this a viable threat to countries' economies, even just for the aviation industry?
Definitely po, ma'am. It remains a threat. And I think, ma'am, if we now consider these talks about the new strain, particularly from the UK, I think that we see a glimpse into what could happen if lockdowns are extended in as much as they were extended in the UK. I'm sure that you've encountered news reports, po, ma'am, of people rioting in the UK, of protesting against the lockdowns.
Yes.
So
yes.
at some point, ma'am, people will reach their breaking point and push back against these lockdowns. So that's another risk factor that should be considered, and it is directly related to the idea that they are fighting for their livelihoods. Sure, I would think that these people are not. I would think that these people are not treating COVID lightly. But at the end of the day, they have made the distinction, or they have recognized that if they don't work, their lives would be at risk, maybe not from COVID, but from not having jobs, from not having money. So these are issues that have to be weighed carefully, especially when it comes to discussions as to how to deal with the supposed new strain. But supposedly, ma'am, I think that reports are coming in that the vaccines, at least the ones devised by Pfizer, are supposedly effective against the new strain.
Mhm.
So there's that sort of thing to hope for moving forward.
That's true. Yeah, just in the UK, I had the news. My reports that transportation of goods just got delayed due to this new strain. And as you said, there were protests, drivers clashing with the police just to get through the borders. Yeah. So, with the aviation industry, what do you see looking forward next year, 2021? How do you think should we respond to this?
For the aviation po, ma'am, is insofar as travel is concerned, I think that a lot of the prospects for the travel industry, their hopes hinge on the efficacy of the vaccines that are coming, as well as how these vaccines will be rolled out in both the destination countries and the source countries of travelers. So the critical thing here, the critical question that has to be answered would be, will the vaccines change anything insofar as how governments treat COVID? Because it's the question is still up in the air, because we have seen reports that some countries will still treat COVID very much in the same way they do now, even if the vaccine is rolled out. Which then begs the question, what then is the vaccine for? If that is the case, then the prospects for the travel industry, for the aviation industry, they would remain dim. Because if nothing substantive changes from now and until next year, or when the vaccine is rolled out, then I doubt that there would be this sort of massive upsurge in flights and in travel among people, and especially if there is no change in perceptions among people. If people still think that COVID is a threat, they can still contract COVID easily. If they do not trust the vaccine to protect them, if there are these, if they don't feel safe traveling, then people will still not travel, and there would be no recovery, or there would be no sharp recovery for the travel, the tourism, and the aviation industries, at least in my view. So again, ma'am, a lot of it hinges on the vaccine's efficacy, how it is rolled out, and how policies will change or not change once the vaccine has been rolled out.
In your study, does the national carrier fall under domestic airline?
Ma'am, we split it up po into domestic and international.
Okay.
So it would depend po on, is it a domestic flight or is it an international flight? Since PAL has both, then they're covered naman po.
Blended learning. What does the survey say about the trust levels for DepEd and CHED?
They have moderate levels of approval, both DepEd and CHED, but they also have relatively high levels of disapproval. While their approval remains higher than their disapproval, the disapproval levels are high relative to other agencies. So what we see there is that there appears to be some pushback to
what
the
caused what the dip?
do.
Yeah, in their approval rating.
I would think that it would have to do with their rollout po of their module based learning during the new normal. So I would think that a part of it would be because some households do not approve of the quality or the quantity of the content. And of course, you also have some households that would have some difficulty with absorbing and effectively using these modules, because the onus falls on the parents or the guardians of the children the guardians and the parents now take a more active role in the learning of the children. So that may prove to be something that people do not particularly approve of. So I think a lot of it stems from the transition away from the classroom-based education that people are used to. So there is this hesitation there is this pushback against the current mode of module-based learning. DepEd understands that children being in school, physically in school, interacting with classmates, interacting with their teachers is very important, especially for those in elementary. That kind of interaction is critical to the development of children, and I would think that both the DepEd and a lot of parents would recognize that, and hence the sort of pushback on the module based online only type of learning.
Filipinos seem to be very adjusted to traditional learning environments.
Yes, po, ma'am.
Yes. I would be very interested in new surveys.
Ma'am.
Result as well as it progresses to next year.
Yes, po, ma'am. We're going to be tracking this over time, po, ma'am. Especially since this is of course interesting because there are talks that DepEd is planning to roll out limited face-to-face classes, at least in those areas with low or non-existent COVID cases. So I think that the DepEd is moving in the right direction, at least insofar as the delivery of these services are concerned, especially from the perspective that children need that kind of interaction.
True. Would you know of other maybe ASEAN learning surveys? ASEAN learning surveys, do you?
Ma'am, wala pa po akong na-encounter na would be similar in our, but I think that in the US po, ma'am, I think that there were certain studies made. They haven't been vetted, but there were studies that showed that the performance of students, especially those struggling, the performance of students that were already struggling pre-COVID, diminished during the pandemic. So the children that were already struggling struggled even more when they shifted into off-site or non-face-to-face learning. So I would think that I would agree that there would be some people who would have trouble learning remotely or through online means. May mahihirapan at mahihirapan talaga, ma'am.
True. Yeah, I was just wondering because in ASEAN, Singapore, Malaysia, these are very tech-based learning institutions. Bears looking into it. It recurs in other cultural learning environments. Notable consumption behavior changes figured out by the survey. Would you say that social media has helped Filipinos cope with the pandemic lockdowns?
I would think so, ma'am, but we didn't take a look specifically into that yet. But we will be in the future pa, ma'am. We will be mahaba na po kasi yung survey, so we weren't able to include it. But in the next survey po, we will be including a consumption, specifically po yung sinabi niyo po, a survey on the changing consumption habits of Filipinos, which will of course include questions on how social media or yung online selling platforms have affected or have changed their spending habits, their consumption patterns.
All right. This has been a very lively, very interesting discussion of the current mood and temperament of the Filipinos in 2020. And we're looking forward to our next discussion, to our next survey discussion. Dr. Yap, thank you so much for your time. Very enlightening.
Maraming salamat rin po, ma'am.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Salamat po. Thank you, Dr. Yap.
Maraming salamat, ma'am. We'll be sure to keep you posted on the release of our next survey po, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll see you again.
And before we go, I would like to greet my co-anchor, my beautiful co-anchor, a very happy birthday. Hello, Esther. Happy birthday, and thank you for joining me today and helping me out as usual.
Hi, Alma. Thank you so much for your greeting. Also for my friends and family in the Philippines, thank you for all your greetings. And
I think...
Okay, so before we go, Alma, we would like to share the New Year video greeting from all of us in ASEAN Bureau. Let's watch this.
We know how challenging this year that is about to end to all of us. We may not exactly know what will happen tomorrow, but one thing is for sure.
We will continue to hope, to love,
To dream,
to inspire,
to be grateful,
to be brave,
to be faithful,
to be prayerful.
We will continue to live in the new normal in these interesting times. From the ABC correspondents in ASEAN Bureau,
Sawadi Pimay na Krab,
Rikri Chanam Tumoy,
Chukmong Namoy,
Sabaydi Pimay,
Suba alot aurudak huewa.
Au ahurage tahunia kian.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
Oh, wow, that is so beautiful. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year, Alma.
Are they with us? Are they? Do we have time? Can we talk to them for a while?
My fellow correspondents are here.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. There you go.
Happy New Year, everyone.
What are your plans for the new year? What's happening there in Vietnam? Yes.
I'll be celebrating New Year with my brothers and sisters here in Vietnam. And last year I was alone, but hopefully this is a very happy New Year.
Will you be going out, or you're staying home because of the pandemic? How will it be different today? This time?
Because last year I was alone in my room, but now we will go to one of my friend's house and we'll have barbecue.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't go swimming though. It's too cold here now. So.
Oh.
But anyway, Alma, I'd just like to greet my family and my best friends, my friends back in Cebu, and also one of my best friends in Anaheim, California, and my family in Dallas, Texas. So Happy New Year, guys. I miss you so much. I love you.
And Eliana? Hi there. How are you celebrating your New Year's?
Well, actually, Micah and I will be celebrating together with my dad.
Oh, okay. Yes, the best friends, Micah and Eliana. So, with your dad, where is your dad?
Oh, my dad is actually working in Hue, Vietnam, but he visits me every weekend here in Da Nang, Vietnam.
Okay. And what about social distancing protocols? How is it there?
Also for Alma, there's no recent update on how we should do social distancing. However, everybody is still encouraged to continue wearing face masks in public places.
All right. And Micah, I'm sure you'll be enjoying your time with your best friend.
Yes. It's my first time to be away from my family.
Oh.
But Happy New Year to all and to my family back in Pampanga.
Oh, okay, Kabalin. All right. And Steph, How is it in Maldives? I believe some tourists have already arrived over there.
Well, we will just celebrating the New Year's with family and friends, and that's all.
Social distancing measures, how is it going to be? Masks?
I'm sorry?
Protocols in place? Are there any restrictions during the New Year's? What will you be able to do?
Social distancing.
Fireworks? None? Okay. And Esther, how are you celebrating your birthday? And the New Year's?
Okay, so the New Year countdown celebration here in Thailand are all canceled. But of course, my birthday is never canceled. So
Never.
I'm gonna be celebrating my birthday here at home to keep myself safe and just have some video call with family back in the Philippines.
All right. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Enjoy your New Year's. Have a safe and Happy New Year. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you for your video. Thank you very much. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, Alma, and thank you all for watching from EBC Thailand Bureau. I'm Esther Odanga, greeting everyone a very Happy New Year. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we live in interesting times.
And I'm Alma Angeles, greeting everyone in ASEAN and the whole world a Happy New Year, advance Happy New Year. We live in interesting times.